The moment a king kissed a broken woman, and the entire frontier held its breath. They said betrayal in the borderlands came with a knife to the back, but for Kaela Thorn, it came with a smile, a lie, and a crowd of witnesses. The night Darian chose power over her, she stood alone in the dirt, humiliated, exposed, destroyed, until a man darker than the storm clouds rode in. King Rovan Blackridge didn't ask permission. He didn't offer comfort. He claimed her mouth in front of everyone, including the man who'd thrown her away. That kiss? It wasn't salvation. It was a declaration of war. Stay until the end to see how one woman turned her greatest shame into the most dangerous weapon on the frontier. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. The wind that night carried ash. Kaela Thorn stood at the edge of the settlement square, her boots sinking into mud that had frozen and thawed so many times it no longer held shape. Around her, the crowd pressed close, too close, their breath fogging in the bitter cold, their eyes bright with the kind of hunger that came from boredom and cruelty mixing in equal measure. She'd known this gathering was meant to be a celebration. Harvest yields, new trade agreements. The council had called for it weeks ago, and Darian had told her to dress well, to smile, to stand beside him like she always did, like she belonged. She'd believed him. Fool. The bonfire crackled at the center of the square, flames licking toward a sky choked with stars that gave no warmth. Shadows danced across faces she'd known for years, people she'd fought beside, bled beside, starved beside. The borderlands didn't forgive weakness, and neither did its people. Survival here meant alliances. It meant knowing who to trust. It meant picking the right partner. Kaela had thought she'd done that 3 years ago when she'd chosen Darian Cole. Back then, he'd been just another scavenger trying to carve out a life in the harsh frontier. They'd met during a supply raid gone wrong. Bandits had ambushed their separate groups, and they'd ended up fighting back-to-back against odds that should have killed them both. She remembered the way he'd looked at her afterward, blood on his face and respect in his eyes. "You fight like you've got nothing to lose," he'd said. "I don't," she'd replied. That had been the truth then. Kaela had come to the borderlands alone, running from a past she didn't talk about. No family, no connections, just survival skills and a stubborn refusal to die. Darian had offered her something she'd never had. Partnership. Someone to watch her back. Someone to build something with. For 3 years, they'd been inseparable. They'd established trade routes together, fought off raiders together, built a reputation together. She'd thought they were working toward the same thing, a life that meant something more than just not dying. She'd been wrong. "Listen up," Darian's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. He stood on the raised platform near the fire, his shoulders broad beneath the heavy fur cloak she'd mended 3 times last winter. His jaw was clean-shaven now, polished. His hair was trimmed neat, his clothes were new, expensive. He looked nothing like the man who used to sleep with a blade under his pillow and dirt beneath his nails. He looked like someone important. The crowd quieted. Kaela felt her chest tighten, something cold and unfamiliar twisting in her gut. She told herself it was just nerves. Darian had been distant lately, distracted maybe, but that was normal. The settlement's council had been leaning on him, pushing him to prove himself, to secure his place among the leadership. She understood that. She'd been patient. She'd always been patient with him. "Most of you know me," Darian continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "You know what I've done for this place, the supply runs I've led, the threats I've put down, the alliances I've built." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Kaela shifted her weight, her fingers curling inside the worn leather gloves she wore. Something was off. Darian wasn't looking at her, not once. His eyes skimmed over where she stood like she was part of the scenery. "And you know," he said, his voice dropping into something quieter, something that made people lean in, "that to lead, a man needs more than strength. He needs the right kind of support, the right connections." Kayla's pulse stuttered. She'd heard this speech before, pieces of it anyway. Darian practiced his council speeches with her sometimes, asking for her opinion on tone and phrasing. But this one felt different. The words were familiar, but the context was all wrong. "That's why tonight," Darian said, and finally, his eyes found hers. "I'm making an announcement that will secure our future." Her breath caught. The crowd shifted, whispers growing louder. A few people glanced her way and she felt heat crawl up her neck despite the cold. Was he... After 3 years, was he finally going to make it official? She'd never needed the ceremony, never cared about titles, but she knew it mattered here. The settlement respected bonds that were declared publicly. Maybe this was Darian's way of telling her that she did belong, that she was part of his future, that everything they'd built together meant something. "I'll be joining with Maris Vec," Darian said. "Daughter of Councilman Vec, the Union will solidify my position on the council and strengthen our trade routes through the Eastern Pass." The world didn't tilt, it dropped. Kaela's ears rang. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some gasping, others laughing in that ugly way people did when they smelled blood in the water. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she'd just heard because it didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Her eyes locked on Darian, who still stood on that platform, still wore that calm, controlled expression like he hadn't just ripped her entire life apart with a single sentence. Maris Vec stepped forward from the crowd. Blonde, polished, draped in furs that cost more than Kaela had earned in a year. Her face was painted with cosmetics that made her skin look porcelain perfect, her lips stained red like fresh blood. She smiled, small, demure, perfect, and took Darian's offered hand with practiced grace. The crowd roared louder, cheers mixed with whistles, mixed with that horrible laughter. Kaela's legs moved without permission, carrying her forward through people who parted like she carried disease. She reached the edge of the platform, her voice scraping out of her throat like rusted metal. "Darian." He looked down at her, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his face. Regret, maybe. Guilt. Some recognition that he'd just done something unforgivable. Then it was gone, replaced by cold indifference. "Kaela." His tone was flat, detached, like she was a stranger asking for directions. "I didn't think you'd still be here." "Still be—" Her voice cracked. She hated herself for it, hated the weakness in the sound. "What the hell is this?" "An arrangement," he said simply. "One that benefits everyone. Everyone except me." Darian sighed, the sound cutting deeper than any blade. He looked tired suddenly, like her presence was exhausting him. "You knew this wasn't permanent. We were convenient. For a time. Convenient." The word hung in the air like a noose. 3 years, Kaela said, her voice shaking now, all her control slipping away. 3 years, Darian. I fought beside you. I bled for you. I saved your life twice. I survived for you. And I'm grateful, he said, and the condescension in his tone made her teeth ache. He actually sounded like he meant it, like gratitude was some kind of consolation prize for being discarded. But gratitude doesn't build a legacy. It doesn't secure council seats or trade agreements. It doesn't— He paused, choosing his words carefully. It doesn't give a man what he needs to truly lead. And I don't give you that? Her hands were shaking now. After everything, you're a survivor, Kaela. That's admirable. But survival isn't the same as ambition. You never wanted more than just existing, getting by. I need someone who understands what it takes to actually build something that lasts. Maris smiled wider, her hand still clasped in his. The message was clear. She understood. She was what he needed. Kaela felt like she'd been gutted. You're nothing here, Kaela, Darian said, and his voice was so calm, so certain that it felt like objective truth. You never were. You were just useful. Until you weren't. The crowd exploded. Not with anger, with delight. They loved this. Loved watching someone fall. Loved the spectacle of humiliation playing out in front of them. Kaela's pain was their entertainment, and they drank it down like it was something precious. Should have seen it coming, someone called out. Girl with no name thinking she could hold on to him, another voice added, female and sharp. Pathetic, a man said, close enough that Kaela could smell the alcohol on his breath. She stood there, frozen at the base of the platform, her hands trembling inside her gloves. Part of her wanted to scream. To lunge at Darian, claw that smug expression off his face, make him hurt even a fraction of what she was feeling. But another part, a quieter, darker part that had kept her alive this long, whispered that he was right. What was she, really? A woman with no family name, no council ties, no fortune or connections? Just another pair of hands in a place that chewed people up and spit them out when they stopped being useful. She'd survived everything the Borderlands had thrown at her. Starvation, storms, raiders, disease. But this? This public execution of everything she'd believed in? She didn't know how to survive this. Thought she was special, someone muttered from the crowd. A woman's voice, amused and pitying at the same time. Should have known better than to aim above her station, another replied. Wonder if she'll leave now. Can't imagine staying after that. Kaela's vision blurred. Tears, hot, angry, useless tears, burned at the corners of her eyes. She wouldn't let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who were already tearing her apart. She'd give them her pain, but she wouldn't give them her tears. She turned to leave, pushing blindly through the crowd that pressed too close, their whispers following her like accusations. And that's when everything changed. The crowd parted. Not willingly, not gently. It split like meat under a cleaver, people stumbling back with gasps and startled curses. A ripple of something new moved through them, something that tasted like fear and smelled like danger. Kaela froze mid-step, her survival instinct screaming that something was wrong. The sound came first. Hooves on frozen ground, heavy and deliberate. Not the frantic pace of someone arriving late, but the measured rhythm of someone who didn't need to hurry because everything would wait for them anyway. Then voices, low and urgent, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The Alpha. Blackridge. What's he doing here? Did someone send for him? Nobody sends for the Alpha. He comes when he wants. Kaela turned slowly, her heart hammering for entirely different reasons now. And there he was. King Rovan Blackridge rode through the settlement square like he owned it, because technically he did. The Northern Territories answered to him, and everyone here knew it. The settlement existed at his pleasure, governed by councils he'd approved, protected by laws he'd established. He sat astride a massive black warhorse that looked like it had been bred for war, and nothing else. The animal was scarred, muscular, its eyes showing white around the edges in a way that suggested it barely tolerated anyone touching it. But Rovan sat easy in the saddle, his posture relaxed, but his presence anything but. Even in the dim firelight, Kaela could see the hard lines of his face, sharp jaw covered in dark stubble, cheekbones that could cut glass, dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. His mouth was set in something that wasn't quite a frown but wasn't neutral either. He wore black from head to toe, leather and wool and fur that looked both practical and expensive. No crown, no obvious symbols of authority. He didn't need them. Authority radiated off him like heat from the bonfire. The crowd scattered further as he dismounted in one smooth motion, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud that somehow carried in the sudden silence. 2 guards flanked him, silent, armed, their faces hidden beneath hoods. But Rovan didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge them at all. He didn't look at Darian or Maris or the council members who'd suddenly gone pale and stiff on their platform. He looked at Kaela, and he didn't look away. Her breath hitched. She'd seen him before. Everyone had. The Alpha didn't hide in his fortress. He rode through his territories regularly, enforcing order, settling disputes, reminding people exactly who held the leash. But she'd never been this close. Never felt the full weight of that gaze directed at her specifically. It was like being pinned by a wolf, assessed, measured, judged. Rovan moved toward her, slow and deliberate. Each step was purposeful, eating up the space between them while the crowd held its collective breath. Even the fire seemed to quiet, crackling softer as if it too was waiting to see what would happen. Kaela's pulse hammered in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to lower her eyes, to show submission the way everyone did when the Alpha walked past. But her legs wouldn't obey. Couldn't obey. She was trapped in place by shock and pain and the sheer impossibility of King Rovan Blackridge walking directly toward her like she was the only person in the square. He stopped in front of her. Close. Too close for a king and a nobody. Close enough that she could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Close enough that she caught the scent of leather and smoke, and something darker she couldn't name, but that made her hindbrain whisper danger. "Kaela Thorn," he said. His voice was low, rough, the kind of sound that made people either obey immediately or run. There was no warmth in it, but there was no cruelty either. Just certainty. She swallowed hard. Yes. One word. That's all she could manage. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected, which was something at least. "You've had a difficult evening," Rovan said. It wasn't a question, wasn't sympathy, just a statement of fact delivered in that same flat, assessing tone. Her jaw tightened. Pride, stupid, useless pride, made her lift her chin. I'm fine. Liar. The word should have been an insult. Should have made her angry. Instead, it felt like acknowledgement, like he saw through every brittle layer of false composure she was clinging to and didn't judge her for it, didn't mock her for it, just saw it. Why are you here? She managed, because what else could she say? Why was the alpha of the Northern Territories standing in front of her, in the middle of her humiliation, looking at her like she mattered? Rovan tilted his head slightly, his gaze flicking past her to the platform where Darian still stood frozen. I came for council business, but it seems I arrived at an interesting moment. Interesting, Kaela repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. That's one way to put it. What would you call it? A public execution? Her voice cracked again, damn it. Just without the blood. Something shifted in Rovan's expression. Not pity. Thank everything that existed. Not pity. But something sharper. Something that looked almost like anger, though it was controlled, leashed, aimed somewhere that wasn't her. He turned, his attention sliding to Darian. The entire square seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind died down. Darian Cole, Rovan said. His voice carried effortlessly, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. Not loud, just absolute. Darian straightened on his platform, his confidence faltering for the first time that night. My lord, I was just announcing your betrothal. Yes, I heard. Rovan's tone was flat, unimpressed, the way someone might discuss finding mold on bread. Publicly humiliating a woman who served this settlement with distinction for years in the process. Clever strategy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, uncertain now, confused. They'd been enjoying the spectacle of Kaela's downfall, but now the alpha was here and suddenly no one knew what was happening. Darian's jaw tightened. His hands, Kaela noticed, had curled into fists at his sides. With respect, my lord, my personal affairs are no longer personal when you make them everyone's business. Rovan's gaze was ice, the kind of cold that burned. Or did you forget that leadership requires more than ambition? It requires honor. Honor? Darian's voice rose slightly, defensive now. I've done nothing dishonorable. I made a strategic alliance for the benefit of… You dismissed her as nothing, Rovan interrupted, and there was something dangerous in his tone now, something that made people in the crowd edge backward. In front of witnesses, you stripped her of dignity for the sake of advancement. You threw away 3 years of loyalty like it was garbage. He paused, and the silence that followed was suffocating. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. Darian's face flushed red. You don't know the circumstances. You don't know what… I know enough. Rovan's voice cut him off again, sharp as a whip crack. I know that Kaela Thorn has kept supply lines running when you were too sick to ride. I know she negotiated the peace with the Western scavengers when you were ready to start a war we couldn't afford. I know she saved lives in this settlement, including yours, and you repay that by calling her nothing. The crowd had gone completely silent now. Kaela stared at Rovan, shock coursing through her. How did he know any of that? The settlement kept records, sure, but they were basic, and the Alpha had territories to run. Why would he know specific details about what she'd done, unless he'd been watching? The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Darian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. She's just one person. The settlement needs leaders who understand the value of loyalty, Rovan said. Not ambitious children who sacrifice good people for social climbing. Maris, who'd been silent this entire time, finally spoke up. Her voice was sweet, carefully modulated. My lord, surely you understand that alliances must be strategic. Your father's position is secure because I allow it to be, Rovan said, without even looking at her. And if he raised a daughter who thinks cruelty is strategy, perhaps I should reconsider that allowance. Maris went pale. Her mouth snapped shut. Rovan turned back to Kaela, and before she could process what was happening, before she could breathe or think or brace herself, he reached out and took her wrist, not roughly, but firmly, unmistakably. His hand was warm through her glove, his grip steady and certain. What are you… Kaela started, her voice barely a whisper. Rovan pulled her toward him, closing the distance between them in a single step. His free hand came up, fingers curling against her jaw, tilting her face up. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and the gentleness of it was so at odds with everything else about him that it stole what little breath she had left. His eyes locked on hers, dark, intense, asking a question she didn't understand, and then he kissed her. Not gently, not hesitantly, like a claim, like a challenge, like a declaration of war written in heat and pressure and the kind of certainty that left no room for doubt. The world exploded. Or maybe that was just the crowd. Kaela couldn't tell, couldn't process anything beyond the shock of Rovon's mouth on hers, his hand steady against her jaw, his body solid and warm where she'd reflexively grabbed his coat to keep from falling. His lips were firm, demanding, but not cruel. The kiss tasted like smoke and winter and something wild she couldn't name. It wasn't romantic, wasn't gentle or careful. It was possessive and deliberate and completely overwhelming. Her mind went blank. Every thought scattered like birds startled into flight. Her body froze, caught between instinct and confusion, between the urge to pull away and the strange, terrifying desire to lean in. She should have pulled away, should have shoved him back, should have done something, but she didn't. Because for the first time all night, maybe for the first time in years, she wasn't the one being dismissed. She was the one being claimed. And in a world where power was everything and she'd just lost all of hers, being claimed by the most powerful man in the territories felt like stepping from darkness into blinding light. The kiss lasted forever, or maybe only seconds. Kaela had no sense of time anymore. When Rovon finally pulled back, his eyes were still locked on hers, dark, intense, unflinching. His hand lingered against her jaw for just a moment longer before he released her and stepped back. "You're not nothing," he said quietly, just for her, low enough that only she could hear over the chaos around them. "And anyone who tells you otherwise is a fool." Then he turned to face the crowd, his voice rising to that carrying tone that commanded attention. "Let it be known," Rovon said, and every person in the square went silent, "that Kaela Thorn is under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me, and I promise you—" His gaze swept over Darian, cold and lethal. "You don't want to test that." Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The weight of the Alpha's decree settled over the square like snow, cold and absolute. And then slowly people began to back away, to whisper, to shift and avoid looking directly at Kaela like she'd transformed into something dangerous. Kaela stood there, rooted to the spot, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her lips still tingled, her mind still reeled. Her entire understanding of reality had just been shattered and reformed into something she didn't recognize. What the hell just happened? Rovon mounted his horse in one smooth motion, the animal sidling beneath him before he brought it under control with barely a shift of his weight. He looked down at her one last time, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "Come to the Northern Keep tomorrow," he said. Not a request, a command. "Noon. We have things to discuss." Kaela's voice failed. She tried again. "I don't understand." "You will," Rovon said, and there might have been the ghost of something almost like amusement in his tone. Or maybe she'd imagined it. "Tomorrow, Kaela. Don't make me send an escort." Then he turned his horse and rode off, his guards falling in behind him, leaving Kaela alone in the square with a crowd full of stunned stares and a former lover whose face had gone white as snow. The silence stretched and stretched, until finally Darian found his voice. It came out strangled, furious, barely controlled. "What did you do?" Kaela blinked, turned to look at him standing on his platform with his perfect bride and his ruined moment. And for the first time all night, she felt something other than pain. She felt power. "Nothing," she said softly, her voice steady now. "Yet." And then she walked away. Through the crowd that parted for her now, not with mockery, but with fear and confusion, and a new kind of respect that came from being claimed by the Alpha. Past people who'd laughed at her minutes ago and now couldn't meet her eyes. She walked through the settlement with her head high, her back straight, ignoring the whispers that followed her like a second shadow. "Did you see?" The Alpha kissed her. "What does it mean? Darian's finished." She must have planned it. No one plans being kissed by Blackridge. What's going to happen now? Kaela didn't have answers to any of it. Didn't understand what had just happened or why or what it meant for tomorrow or the day after that. All she knew was that the kiss had changed everything. And deep down, beneath the shock and confusion and lingering pain of Darian's betrayal, something else stirred. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. The Borderlands didn't forgive weakness, but maybe, just maybe, they rewarded strength in unexpected forms. And if the most powerful man in the North thought she had that strength, maybe she did. Kaela reached her small cabin at the edge of the settlement, stepped inside, and finally let herself lean against the closed door. Her legs shook, her hands trembled. Her breath came in gasps that might have been laughter, or sobs, or both. Tomorrow she'd go to the Northern Keep. Tomorrow she'd find out what King Rovan Blackridge wanted with her. Tomorrow everything would change again. But tonight? Tonight she stood in the darkness of her cabin and touched her lips where the Alpha had kissed her, and felt the balance of her entire world shift on its axis. The frontier had taught her many things: how to fight, how to survive, how to endure. But it had never taught her this: what to do when the king himself decided you were worth keeping. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying ash and snow and the distant sounds of a settlement trying to process what they'd just witnessed. And somewhere in the darkness, Kaela smiled. Kaela didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, still wearing her coat, watching the window as dawn broke over the settlement in shades of gray and pale gold. Her mind kept circling back to the same moment, Rovan's hand on her jaw, his mouth claiming hers, the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd said, "You're not nothing." Her fingers drifted to her lips for the 100th time that night. The sensation had faded hours ago, but the memory of it hadn't, couldn't. What had he been thinking? What did he want from her? And why? Why? Had he been watching her long enough to know things even the settlement council barely paid attention to? Outside, footsteps crunched through frost. Voices carried on the wind, hushed and urgent. The settlement was waking up, and Kaela knew exactly what they'd be talking about. What they'd all be talking about. Her stomach twisted. She'd faced down raiders with knives, survived winters that killed half the settlement, negotiated with scavengers who'd just as soon slit her throat as shake her hand. But walking through that settlement today, facing those stairs, hearing those whispers, that terrified her. A sharp knock at her door made her jump. "Kaela?" A woman's voice. Mira, one of the few people in the settlement who'd ever treated her like a friend instead of just another survivor. "You awake?" Kaela stood, her knees protesting from sitting too long in the cold. She opened the door. Mira stood on the threshold, her dark hair pulled back in a messy braid, concern written all over her weathered face. She was older than Kaela by maybe 15 years, had buried 2 husbands and raised 3 children in this harsh place. Nothing rattled her. She looked rattled now. "You need to leave," Mira said without preamble. "Now, before the settlement wakes up properly." "What? Don't play stupid. You know what happened last night." Mira pushed past her into the cabin, closing the door behind her. "The whole settlement's lost their minds. Half of them think you planned it somehow. The other half think you're cursed. And Darian—" She stopped, shaking her head. "Darian's telling anyone who'll listen that you seduced the Alpha, that you've been plotting against him for months." Kaela's hands curled into fists. "That's insane." "Of course it's insane. But when did that ever stop people from believing it?" Mira moved to the window, peering out. "There's already talk. The council's meeting this morning. Vec is furious. His daughter was humiliated. Darian's pressing for them to, I don't know, do something. Exile you maybe. Call it treason or conspiracy or whatever legal excuse they can manufacture." "They can't." "They can try, and even if they can't make it stick, they can make your life hell." Mira turned back to her. "Unless you actually do what the Alpha commanded, go to the Northern Keep, get his protection formally established. Otherwise, you're just a woman with a target on her back and no one willing to defend her." Kaela's jaw tightened. "I'm not running." "I'm not saying run. I'm saying go to the one person who has the power to shut all of this down." Mira grabbed her arm, squeezing hard. "Listen to me. I've lived here 30 years. I've seen what happens when the settlement turns on someone. You think Darian's betrayal hurt? Wait until your neighbors start refusing to trade with you, until the merchants won't sell you supplies, until someone decides you're enough of a problem that an accident in the dark would solve everything." The words hit like a physical blow. Kaela had seen it happen before. People who'd crossed the wrong person, who'd become inconvenient or dangerous. They didn't last long in the borderlands. "Noon," Kaela said quietly. He said noon. "Then go early. Show respect. Show you're taking this seriously." Mira released her arm. "And Kaela, whatever the Alpha wants from you, consider saying yes. Because right now, he's the only reason you're not already being run out of here." After Mira left, Kaela stood in the center of her cabin, looking at 3 years of life packed into one small space. Her weapons on the wall, her few books on the shelf, the blanket she'd traded a month's worth of rations for because she'd been so sick of being cold. She'd built this. Not much, but it was hers. And now it was all falling apart because she'd been foolish enough to love someone who'd seen her as a stepping stone. She changed into her cleanest clothes, still worn, still patched, but without visible mud or blood, braided her dark hair back tight, strapped her knife to her belt not because she thought she'd need it at the keep, but because leaving without it felt wrong. Then she stepped outside. The settlement was awake now. People moved between buildings, carrying water, chopping wood, going about the daily business of survival. But when they saw her, they stopped, stared, whispered to each other behind their hands. Kaela kept her head high and walked. "There she is," someone said. A man's voice, rough with judgment. "The Alpha's whore." She didn't react, didn't look, just kept walking. "Spread her legs for a king and thinks she's special now," a woman added. Laughter followed. Kayla's fingers itched toward her knife, but she forced them to relax. Fighting would only prove them right, that she was trouble, that she didn't belong, that exile was justified. She made it to the settlement gates without incident, though the walk felt like the longest of her life. The guards there, men she'd fought beside, shared rations with, wouldn't meet her eyes. "Going somewhere?" one asked. Young, barely 20, he'd asked her for advice on trapping just last month. "The Northern Keep," she said. "The Alpha requested my presence." Did he? The guard's tone suggested he didn't believe her. "Or are you running before the council can deal with you?" "I'm following a direct command from King Blackridge," Kaela said carefully. "If you want to stop me, you're welcome to explain that to him." The guards exchanged glances. Neither wanted that responsibility. They stepped aside. Kaela walked through the gates and didn't look back. The road to the Northern Keep was well maintained, one of the few in the territories that didn't turn to mud every time it rained. Rovan's patrols kept it clear of bandits, and traders used it regularly enough that there were even markers every mile. It was a 4-hour walk. Kaela made it in 3, her pace driven by anxiety and the need to be moving, doing, not thinking. The keep itself rose from the landscape like it had grown there, stone and timber built into the side of a mountain, defensible and imposing. Guards walked the walls. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Everything about it radiated power and permanence in a way the settlement never could. Kaela approached the main gate, her heart hammering. 2 guards stepped forward, spears crossed. Both wore the Alpha's colors, black and gray, and neither looked friendly. "State your business," the taller one said. "Kaela Thorn, the Alpha commanded me to appear at noon." The guards exchanged glances. The shorter one nodded and disappeared inside. The other remained, studying her with the kind of assessment that made her feel like livestock being evaluated. "You're early," he said. "Better than late. Most people are too scared to come at all when the Alpha summons them." "Should I be scared?" The question came out before she could stop it. The guard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Might have been respect. Might have been pity. "That depends on why you're here." Before Kaela could respond, the second guard returned with another man, older, dressed in better clothes, carrying himself like someone used to authority. "Miss Thorn," he said with a slight bow. "I'm Garrett, the Alpha's steward. Please, follow me." The keep's interior was warmer than she'd expected. Fires burned in multiple hearths, and the stone walls were hung with furs and tapestries that muffled sound and held heat. People moved with purpose through corridors, servants, guards, officials. All of them glanced at her, curiosity sharp in their eyes. Garrett led her up 2 flights of stairs, down a hallway lined with doors, and finally stopped in front of one made of dark wood carved with wolves. "The Alpha is in a council meeting," Garrett said. "It should conclude shortly. You may wait in here." He opened the door to reveal a study. Bookshelves lined 2 walls, packed with more volumes than Kaela had seen in her entire life. A desk sat beneath a window that looked out over the mountains. A fire crackled in the hearth. Everything smelled like leather and wood smoke and something herbal she couldn't identify. "Someone will bring you tea," Garrett said, and left before she could respond. Kaela stood in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything. This was wealth beyond anything she'd known. These books alone were worth more than her entire cabin and everything in it. She moved to the window, looking out at the view. From here she could see for miles, forests, mountains, the silver ribbon of a river cutting through the valley. Somewhere out there, beyond her line of sight, was the settlement, her old life, everything she'd thought she was building. "It's a different perspective, isn't it?" Kaela spun around. Rovan stood in the doorway, still dressed in black, still radiating that same controlled power. His eyes tracked over her, assessment, not judgment, before he stepped inside and closed the door. "You're early," he said. "Your steward said you were in a meeting." "I was. I left it." He moved to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle and 2 glasses. "The counselors were arguing about trade tariffs, tedious even by council standards." "You left a council meeting because I showed up early?" "I left because what I have to say to you is more important than listening to old men argue about numbers." He poured dark liquid into both glasses, then offered her one. Kaela took it because refusing felt dangerous. The glass was heavier than she expected, the liquid inside smelling sharp and complex. "It's not poisoned," Rovan said, and there might have been amusement in his voice. "I didn't think it was." "Yes, you did." He took a drink from his own glass. "You'd be an idiot not to consider it. And I don't think you're an idiot." Kaela sipped cautiously. Whatever it was burned going down but left warmth in its wake. Not unpleasant. Rovan moved to the desk, leaning against it, watching her. The silence stretched. He seemed comfortable with it in a way that made her increasingly nervous. "Why did you kiss me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "Because Darian Cole needed to understand that you weren't his to discard." "I'm not yours to claim either." "No," Rovan agreed. "You're not. That's why I'm giving you a choice." Kaela's grip tightened on her glass. "What choice?" "The settlement will tear you apart if you go back. You know this. The council will find some excuse to exile you, or your neighbors will make your life so miserable you'll leave on your own. Or worse." His eyes were steady on hers. "Darian's already spreading lies. Vec's daughter is demanding retribution for the insult to her honor. You're a problem that needs solving, and the settlement only knows one way to solve problems. So I should run? No, you should stay here." The words landed like stones in still water. Kaela stared at him. "What?" "The keep needs people with your skills. We run supply lines through dangerous territory. We negotiate with hostile groups. We need fighters, strategists, survivors." He set his glass down. "I need someone I can trust to handle situations that require more than brute force." "You don't know me." "I know enough. I've been watching you for over a year, Kaela. Every report from the settlement crosses my desk. Every supply run, every negotiation, every crisis. Your name kept appearing. You kept solving problems that should have been impossible to solve." A year. He'd been watching her for a year. "Why?" she asked. "Because I recognize competence when I see it, and because the borderlands chew up good people and spit them out, and I'm tired of losing valuable resources to politics and stupidity." He straightened. "You're wasted in that settlement. Darian knew it, which is why he kept you close. But he was too much of a coward to acknowledge what you were worth." "And what am I worth? More than being called nothing in front of a crowd." Rovan's voice went hard. "That's not why I'm offering you this, though. I'm offering because I need what you can do. And you need protection, resources, and a place where your skills matter." Kaela's mind raced. "What exactly are you offering?" "A position here. Official. You'd work directly for me, handling supply lines, negotiations with hostile groups, crisis management. The pay is better than anything you'd make in the settlement. You'd have rooms here in the keep, protection, status." He paused. "And you'd never have to see Darian Cole again unless you chose to." It was everything she'd never let herself want. Security, respect, a chance to use her skills for something more than just scraping by. What's the catch? Because there was always a catch. The work is dangerous, the hours are brutal, and everyone will assume you're only here because of what happened last night. They'll call you my whore, my plaything, my political maneuver. You'll face resentment from people who've worked here for years and think you didn't earn your place. So basically the same as the settlement, but with better food. Rovan's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Better weapons too. Kaela looked down at her glass, then back up at him. Why did you really kiss me? Don't tell me it was just about Darian. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. Because I was angry. Because watching him humiliate you felt like watching someone destroy something valuable out of spite. And because... He stopped, started again. Because I wanted you to know that what he said was a lie. You're not nothing. You never were. The honesty in his voice stole her breath. I need time to think, she said. No, she blinked. What? You don't get time. The settlement council is meeting this afternoon to discuss what to do about you. By tonight, they'll have made their decision. You need to make yours now. His eyes locked on hers. Stay here, under my protection, with a job that matters, or go back and fight a battle you can't win. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. Yes, it is. Because the world doesn't give you fair choices, Kaela. It gives you options, and you pick the one that lets you survive. He was right. She hated that he was right. If I stay, she said slowly, I do the work you give me. No strings, no expectations beyond the job. Agreed. And if it doesn't work out, I'm free to leave. If you can survive the work long enough to want to leave, I'll let you go. He extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Kaela looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the room around them that represented everything the settlement had never given her. She thought about Darian's face when he'd called her nothing, about the crowd's laughter, about Mira's warning that morning. She thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering when the settlement would decide she'd become too much of a problem. And she thought about the kiss, about the way Rovan had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth defending, like she was worth something. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, certain. I'll stay, she said. For now. For now is enough. He released her hand. Garrett will show you to your rooms. Get settled. We'll discuss your first assignment tomorrow morning. He moved toward the door, then paused. Kaela, welcome to the keep. Try not to let the bastards grind you down. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in a study that smelled like power and possibility and the faint lingering scent of smoke. Kaela finished her drink in one long swallow, set the glass down, and let herself breathe for the first time since the previous night. She'd just agreed to work for the most dangerous man in the North. She'd just turned her back on 3 years of life in the settlement. She'd just chosen survival over pride, pragmatism over sentiment. And somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and uncertainty, she felt something unexpected. Relief. Garrett appeared minutes later to show her to her new quarters, 2 rooms that were larger than her entire cabin had been, with a real bed, a private hearth, and a window that overlooked the training yards. Dinner is at sundown in the main hall, Garrett said. Someone will fetch you. The Alpha expects his people to attend meals unless they're on assignment. After he left, Kaela stood in the center of her new room, still wearing her coat, still not quite believing any of this was real. A knock at the door made her turn. A young woman entered, carrying linens. I'm supposed to help you settle in, she said. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes were curious. I'm Denna. I work in the keep, mostly running messages and helping new people adjust. I don't need help, Kaela said. Everyone says that. Denna started making up the bed with practiced efficiency. Then they get lost trying to find the dining hall and end up in the armory by accident. The keep's bigger than it looks. Despite herself, Kaela almost smiled. How long have you worked here? 5 years. Came here when I was 14, after my village got wiped out by raiders. The Alpha took in survivors, gave us work. She smoothed the blanket. Some people say he's cruel, cold, ruthless. And maybe he is, with enemies. But with his own people, he's fair. He pays well. And he doesn't tolerate abuse. Why are you telling me this? Denna looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Because I heard what happened in the settlement. And I wanted you to know that whatever they're saying about you down there, it doesn't matter here. The Alpha doesn't keep anyone around who can't pull their weight. If you're here, It's because he thinks you're worth having." The kindness in her words made Kaela's throat tight. "Thank you," she managed. Denna nodded. "Dinner's in 2 hours. Don't be late. The Alpha hates lateness." After she left, Kaela finally took off her coat and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was soft. The room was warm. Everything smelled clean and new. And for the first time since Darian's betrayal, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, not anymore. From exhaustion, from relief, from the overwhelming realization that she'd just walked away from everything familiar and stepped into something completely unknown. But also from hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. The sun was setting when Denna returned to escort her to dinner. The keep's main hall was massive, with long tables and high ceilings and more people than Kaela had expected. Conversations filled the space with noise that reminded her of the settlement but felt different somehow. Less desperate, less cruel. Rovan sat at the head table with his senior staff. He didn't look up when she entered, but she felt his awareness of her like a physical thing. Denna led her to a table near the middle, populated with people who looked like fighters and scouts. Scarred, weathered, competent. "New girl," a man with a crooked nose said. "You're the one from the settlement." Word traveled fast. "Kaela," she said. "Finn, this is Royce, Marta, and the ugly one at the end is Jax." He jerked his thumb at each person. "We run supply lines through the Western Pass. Heard you might be joining that rotation." "Maybe," Kaela said cautiously. "Good. We lost 2 people last month to bandits. Could use someone with actual brains." He pushed a plate toward her. "Eat. The food here's better than anywhere else in the territories, and you look half-starved." Kaela took the plate, surprised by the casual acceptance. No questions about what had happened, no judgment, just practical assessment of whether she'd be useful. Dinner passed in a blur of conversations she only half followed, too aware of Rovan's presence at the head table. He spoke quietly with his advisors, his expression neutral, but twice she caught him looking at her. Each time she looked away first. After the meal, people dispersed to various parts of the keep. Kaela found her way back to her room, only got lost once, and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. She should have felt safe, should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, and any wrong step would send her plummeting. 3 sharp knocks woke her sometime past midnight. Kaela jerked upright, hand going instinctively to her knife. "What?" "It's Garrett." The steward's voice was urgent. "The Alpha needs you. Now. There's been an incident." Kaela was on her feet and out the door in seconds, following Garrett through darkened corridors to a room she didn't recognize. Guards flanked the entrance. Inside, Rovan stood over a bloodied man who'd been tied to a chair. 2 more guards stood nearby, weapons drawn. "Who is he?" Kaela asked. "A messenger," Rovan said. His voice was cold. "From the settlement. He was carrying a letter intended for the council." He held up a piece of paper. "Care to guess what it says?" Kaela's stomach dropped. "Tell me." "It's from Darian, accusing you of conspiring against him, claiming you seduced me to gain power and destroy his reputation, demanding that I return you to the settlement for trial." Rovan's eyes were ice. "He's also offering information about my supply routes in exchange for leniency. Information he got from you, apparently." "That's a lie," Kaela said immediately. I know it's a lie." Rovan crumpled the paper. "But the settlement council doesn't, and Darian's made this personal. He's turned you into a threat that needs neutralizing." The messenger in the chair spat blood. "She's a traitor. Everyone knows it. The Alpha's a fool if he thinks—" Rovan backhanded him, hard. The man's head snapped to the side. "You delivered the message," Rovan said quietly. "Your job is done. Speak again, and I'll cut out your tongue." He turned to Kaela. "This is what I meant about the work being dangerous. Your old life is trying to drag you back down, and it won't stop with one letter." Kayla's hands shook. She curled them into fists to hide it. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to write a response, one that makes it clear you're not their problem anymore, that you're under my protection, and any further attempts to accuse or threaten you will be considered acts against me personally." His eyes locked on hers. "Can you do that?" It wasn't really a question. "Yes," she said. "Good, because tomorrow we ride to the settlement, together. And we're going to make sure everyone understands exactly what your position here means. Kaela's blood went cold. You want to go back there? I want them to see you standing beside me. I want Darian to see what he threw away. And I want the council to understand that if they come after you again, they're declaring war on me. It was the most dangerous thing he could propose. Walking back into the settlement that had turned on her, standing beside the Alpha as a symbol of power she hadn't earned. They'd hate her for it, all of them, but they'd also fear her. And in the borderlands, fear was currency. When do we leave? She asked. Rovan's expression shifted. Might have been approval. Might have been respect. Dawn, he said. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. As Kaela left the room, she heard the messenger start to plead, heard Rovan's cold response. You delivered a threat to someone under my protection. What did you think would happen? She didn't wait to hear more. Back in her room, she'd stood at the window, looking out at darkness broken only by scattered torchlight. Tomorrow, she'd ride back to the settlement beside a king. Tomorrow, she'd face everyone who'd laughed at her humiliation. Tomorrow, she'd stand in front of Darian and show him exactly what nothing looked like now. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like armor sliding into place. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like armor sliding into place. Kaela stood at that window until the sky began to lighten, gray creeping into black like smoke through water. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Her mind was too busy cataloging everything that could go wrong when they rode into the settlement. Darian would be ready for her. The council would be hostile. The crowd would be vicious. And she'd be standing there beside the Alpha, like she'd earned it, like she belonged, when everyone knew the truth. She was just a woman who'd been kissed at the right moment by the right person. Except that wasn't the truth, was it? Rovan had said he'd been watching her for a year, that her name kept appearing in reports, that she'd solved problems that should have been impossible. Maybe she had earned this, just not in the way anyone expected. Dawn came cold and sharp. Kaela dressed in the clothes Garrett had left outside her door. Better quality than anything she'd owned, dark leather and wool that marked her as keep personnel. The knife at her belt felt inadequate suddenly. She wished for a sword, for armor, for something that would make her feel less exposed. But exposure was the point, wasn't it? Rovan wanted them to see her, wanted them to understand what she'd become. 3 knocks. Denna's voice. The Alpha's waiting in the courtyard. Kaela took one last look at her room, her new room, her safe room, and walked out. The courtyard was organized chaos. Horses being saddled, guards checking weapons, supplies being loaded onto pack horses, and at the center of it all, Rovan stood beside a massive black warhorse, speaking quietly with Garrett. He looked up when she approached. His eyes tracked over her new clothes, and something flickered in his expression. Approval? Maybe. You're late, he said. By 2 minutes. Still late. But there was no heat in the words. He gestured to a gray mare being held by a stable hand. Yours. Her name's Storm. Don't let the name fool you. She's steady. Won't bolt if things get ugly. You think things will get ugly? I'm prepared for them too. Rovan mounted his own horse in one fluid motion. We ride hard. No stops except to water the horses. We'll reach the settlement by mid-afternoon. Kaela swung into the saddle. Storm shifted beneath her but settled quickly. It had been months since she'd ridden. Horses were expensive, and the settlement only kept a handful for emergencies. But the muscle memory came back fast. 20 guards accompanied them. All armed, all wearing the Alpha's colors. It was a show of force that couldn't be misinterpreted. They rode out as the sun cleared the mountains, light spilling across the landscape in shades of gold and gray. The road was frozen solid, the horses' hooves striking the ground in a rhythm that felt like war drums. Rovan rode at the front, Kaela beside him. The guards formed a protective square around them. No one spoke. The only sounds were hoofbeats and wind and the occasional creak of leather. An hour into the ride, Rovan finally broke the silence. When we arrive, you stay beside me. Don't react to anything they say. Don't defend yourself. Don't engage. He kept his eyes forward. Let me handle the council. And if they try to arrest me anyway, they won't. His voice was flat, certain. Because they're not stupid enough to start a war over one woman. Darian might be. Darian's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Rovan glanced at her. That's why we're doing this now. Before he has time to prepare properly. Before the council commits to a course of action they can't walk back from. It was tactical, strategic. Everything about this ride was calculated to corner the settlement into compliance. And Kaela was the weapon he was using to do it. What if I don't want to be used as a political tool? She asked quietly. Rovan's jaw tightened. Then you should have said no yesterday. But you didn't. You took my offer. You accepted my protection. That comes with responsibilities. Like being paraded in front of people who want me dead? Like showing them that you're not afraid. That you've moved beyond them. That their opinions don't matter anymore because you have something they'll never have. Power. He turned his head, meeting her eyes directly. You can hate me for it later, but right now I need you to trust me. Trust. From a man she'd known for less than 2 days. A man who'd kissed her in front of a crowd and then offered her a job that felt suspiciously like ownership. But he'd also defended her when no one else had seen value in her when everyone else saw convenience, had given her a way out when the alternative was slow destruction. I trust you, she said. It wasn't entirely a lie. Rovan's expression softened slightly. Good, because what comes next requires us to be united. Any sign of division, and the council will try to exploit it. 2 hours later, one of the guards rode up beside them. My lord, riders ahead. Settlement patrol, looks like. Rovan held up a hand and the entire group slowed. Kaela's pulse kicked up as 4 riders emerged from the tree line ahead, spreading across the road in a clear blocking formation. She recognized 2 of them, Marcus and Jen. Both had served on patrols with her before. Both had shared rations and watch shifts and jokes around campfires. Both looked at her now like she was a stranger. That's far enough, Marcus called out. His hand rested on his sword hilt. State your business. Rovan's expression didn't change. I'm King Rovan Blackridge, Alpha of the Northern Territories. I'm here to address your council on a matter of governance. Stand aside. The council hasn't authorized a royal visit, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but Kaela could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew exactly how dangerous this was. I don't need permission to visit settlements under my jurisdiction. Rovan's voice cut like a blade. Now move, or I'll move you. The patrol guards looked at each other. 4 of them, 21 on Rovan's side. The math was clear, but Marcus's eyes fixed on Kaela. Is she why you're here? Miss Thorn is under my protection and employ. Any accusations or actions taken against her are actions taken against me personally. Rovan's voice was ice. I'm here to make that clear to your council. Now, move. Jen leaned toward Marcus, whispering something urgent. Marcus's jaw worked, conflict playing on his face. Finally, he pulled his horse aside. The council's not going to like this, he said. I'm not here to be liked. Rovan rode forward, and the rest of the group followed. As they passed, Jen caught Kaela's eye. The look she gave her was complicated. Part resentment, part fear, part something that might have been sympathy. You've made a mistake, Jen said quietly, just to her. Coming back here. Kaela didn't respond. Couldn't, because part of her thought Jen might be right. The settlement came into view an hour later, sprawled across a valley like a wound in the landscape. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved between buildings. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful. But as they rode closer, Kaela could see faces turning toward them, could feel the weight of attention like a physical thing. Word spread faster than they could ride. The Alpha was here, and he'd brought her. By the time they reached the central square, half the settlement had gathered. The same square where Darian had humiliated her, where Rovan had kissed her, where her entire life had shattered and reformed in the space of minutes. Now she was riding into it beside a king, flanked by armed guards, looking down at people who'd mocked her 2 days ago. The shift in power was so absolute it felt surreal. Rovan dismounted, and Kaela followed suit. Her legs were stiff from the ride, her hands shaking slightly as she handed Storm's reins to one of the guards. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet the stares of the crowd with her head high. The council building stood at the square's edge, a structure barely bigger than the others, but marked by better maintenance and the council's seal above the door. As if summoned, 5 council members emerged, Councilman Vec at the front. He looked older than Kaela remembered, harder. His eyes went to her immediately, cold with fury. My lord, Vex said, the title coming out stiff and resentful. This is unexpected. I'm sure it is, Rovan's voice carried across the square. I'm here regarding accusations made against one of my people. Accusations that, if true, would constitute conspiracy. If false, constitute defamation and attempted political manipulation. His gaze swept over the council. I want this settled, now. Another council member stepped forward. Elena. She'd always been reasonable, one of the few who'd treated Kaela fairly. My lord, perhaps this discussion would be better held in private. No. Rovan's voice cut her off. This started publicly. It ends publicly. Where's Darian Cole? The crowd stirred, whispered, and then parted. Darian walked through, Maris at his side. He'd dressed well, better than usual, like he'd been preparing for this. His face was composed, but Kaela could see the tension around his eyes, the way his hands kept curling and uncurling. He was afraid. Good. My lord, Darian said with a bow that managed to be respectful and condescending at once. I'm glad you're here. Perhaps you can help us resolve this situation. What situation? Rovan asked. His tone was mild, dangerous. Kaela Thorn has been spreading lies about me, about our relationship. She's claimed I betrayed her, abandoned her, when the truth is she was the one who… Stop. Rovan's single word cracked like a whip. I read your letter, your accusations, your offer to trade information about my supply routes for leniency. So let's be very clear about what's happening here. He stepped forward, and Darian actually took a step back. You're attempting to leverage Crown intelligence, information you claim Miss Thorn gave you, to negotiate political favor. That's treason. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Darian's face paled. That's not what I… You offered specific details about northern pass routes in your letter, routes that only my people know. You claimed Kaela gave you that information during your relationship. Rovan's eyes were merciless. So either you're lying about her giving you information, which makes you a manipulator and a fraud, or you're telling the truth, which makes you guilty of possessing Crown intelligence and attempting to sell it. Which is it? Darian's mouth opened, closed. She must have told me years ago. She didn't have access to that information years ago. Those routes were established 8 months ago. Rovan let that sink in. So where did you get it? The trap snapped shut. Kaela could see it happen in real time. Darian realizing he'd been caught in his own lie, scrambling for an explanation that wouldn't condemn him further. I must have misremembered. You falsified intelligence to frame an innocent woman and manipulate the Crown. Rovan's voice carried absolute authority. That's treason, the punishment for which is death. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, people pressing forward and back in chaos. The council members looked at each other in panic. Vec held up his hands. My lord, surely we can discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, unless… Rovan paused. Unless the council would like to argue that Miss Thorn did provide that information. In which case, you're admitting you harbored someone dealing in Crown intelligence for years and did nothing, which makes you complicit. Elena's face went white. The other council members looked like they wanted to disappear. We didn't know, Elena said quickly. We had no idea about any intelligence, because there wasn't any. Rovan turned to face the crowd. Kaela Thorn never had access to sensitive information during her time in this settlement. She never broke any laws. She never betrayed anyone except in Darian Cole's imagination. His voice rose. And he used that imagination to try to have her exiled or killed so he could cover up the fact that he abandoned her for political advancement. Darian lunged forward. You don't understand. She was holding me back. She was… Nothing, Rovan finished. That's what you called her, isn't it? And when she turned out to be something after all, when she had value you'd thrown away, you tried to destroy her rather than admit you'd made a mistake. Maris grabbed Darian's arm, trying to pull him back, but he shook her off. She doesn't belong with you, Darian snarled. She's not special. She's worth more than you ever gave her credit for, Rovan said quietly. And that terrifies you. The words hung in the air like a blade. Darian's control snapped. He reached for his sword, yanking it free with a rasp of steel that made the crowd scream and scatter. She's mine, he shouted. She was always mine. And you… Rovan moved. One moment he was standing still. The next he'd closed the distance and disarmed Darian with a move so fast Kaela almost missed it. The sword clattered to the ground. Darian hit the dirt hard. Rovan's boot on his chest, a knife pressed to his throat. The entire square went silent. "She was never yours," Rovan said softly. "And she never will be. Now you have a choice. Apologize for the lies you've spread. Admit you falsified information to frame her, or die here, in the dirt, in front of everyone." Darian's face was red, veins standing out in his neck. I'll expose you. I'll tell them what you really are." "What am I?" Rovan pressed the knife just slightly harder, and a thin line of blood appeared. "A monster," Darian spat. "Everyone knows it. You rule through fear and violence, and yet I'm not the one who abandoned a loyal partner for status. I'm not the one who lied and manipulated and tried to have someone killed because my ego couldn't handle rejection." Rovan's voice was cold. "So who's the monster here, Darian?" The crowd had formed a circle around them now. Kaela stood at its edge, her heart hammering, unable to look away. This had escalated beyond anything she'd imagined, beyond politics and accusations into something primal and violent. "Apologize," Rovan said again. "Now." "Never." Kayla's body moved before her mind caught up. She stepped forward into the circle, walking until she stood a few feet from where Rovan held Darian down. "Let him go," she said. Rovan's eyes snapped to her. "Kaela, let him go, please." For a long moment, Rovan didn't move. The knife stayed pressed to Darian's throat. Then slowly, he stepped back, sheathing the blade in one smooth motion. Darian scrambled to his feet, breathing hard. His hand went to his throat, coming away bloody. Kaela faced him. Really looked at him for the first time since that night, and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no residual love or hate or anything at all. He was just a man who'd made bad choices. Nothing more. "You were right," she said quietly. "I was holding you back. Because you needed someone who'd lie for you, who'd compromise for you, who'd become smaller so you could feel bigger." She took a breath. "I won't do that. Not for you. Not for anyone." "You think you're better than me now?" Darian's voice shook. "Because you spread your legs for—" Kaela punched him. Her fist connected with his jaw hard enough to send pain shooting up her arm. Darian staggered back, hit the ground again, this time with blood pouring from his split lip. The crowd gasped. Someone might have laughed. "I'm not better than you," Kaela said, shaking out her hand. "I'm just done with you." She turned and walked back to Rovan's side. Her knuckles throbbed. Her heart raced. But her head was clear. Rovan looked at her, something like approval in his eyes. Then he addressed the council. "Darian Cole attempted to manipulate Crown intelligence and frame an innocent woman. The council will decide his punishment, but know this. If he remains in this settlement, he remains under watch. If he causes further trouble, I'll handle it personally." His gaze swept over them. "And Miss Thorn is no longer your concern. Any questions?" Vec's face was purple with suppressed rage. "My daughter!" "Your daughter is free to find a better match," Rovan said flatly. "One who doesn't resort to lies and violence when challenged. I'd suggest you help her do that." Elena stepped forward. "We understand, my lord. The council will address this situation appropriately." It was capitulation, complete and total. Rovan nodded once. "Good. Then we're done here." He turned to Kaela. "Mount up. We're leaving." But before they could move, a voice cut through the crowd. "Wait!" Mira pushed through the people, breathing hard like she'd been running. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "You need to see this," she said, pressing a piece of paper into Kayla's hand. "It just arrived. From the Western Raiders. They're demanding ransom for 5 settlement people they captured last week during a raid. And they're saying—" She swallowed hard. "They're saying if we don't pay, they'll attack the settlement tomorrow night. With everything they have." Kayla's blood went cold. She looked at the paper. The demands were written in crude script, but the threat was clear. 20 barrels of grain, 10 casks of preserved meat, 50 pounds of metal scrap, or every building burns. She looked up at Rovan. His expression had gone from cold to calculating. "How many raiders?" he asked Mira. "Reports say 40, maybe 50, armed with everything they could steal or forge." "And your settlement's defenders?" 20, Maybe 25 if we count everyone who can hold a weapon. Mira's voice shook. We can't fight that many. We can't afford the ransom. We're trapped, Elena finished quietly. She'd followed Mira over. We were going to send word to the keep tomorrow. Ask for help. But she looked at Kaela, then at Rovan. Given everything that just happened, we weren't sure you'd come. Rovan was silent for a long moment. The entire square held its breath. The Northern Territories protect their people, he finally said. Even when those people make terrible choices. Even when they're ungrateful and short-sighted and cruel. His eyes found Kaela's. What do you think? Can this settlement be saved? The question landed like a challenge. Everyone was looking at her now. The council, the crowd, Darian still bleeding in the dirt, waiting to see what she'd say. She'd left this place. She'd chosen the keep, chosen safety, chosen power. She owed these people nothing, but 5 of them were being held hostage, and the rest would die if the raiders attacked. They can be saved, Kaela said, but not by running, not by hiding. The raiders are expecting weakness, expecting you to either pay or panic. She looked at Rovan. What if we gave them neither? Something shifted in his expression. You have a plan. The raiders camp in the old quarry west of here. 3 hours' ride. If we left now, we could reach them before dark. Her mind was racing, pieces falling into place. They're expecting a response tomorrow. They're not expecting us to come to them. Tonight. That's suicide, Vex said flatly. 50 raiders against, 20 guards? You'd be slaughtered. Not if we hit them when they're not ready, Kaela countered. Not if we use the terrain. The quarry has 3 access points. We could split into groups, hit them from multiple directions, create confusion. She's describing a massacre, Beck insisted. My lord, you can't seriously be considering— I am. Rovan's voice was flat, final. He turned to his guards. How many of you know the Western Quarry? 5 hands went up. Good. Miss Thorn, how many settlement fighters can you trust to follow orders? Kaela looked at Mira. How many? 10, maybe 12. Mira's face was pale but determined. The rest are too green or too scared. Then we have 32 fighters against 50 raiders. Rovan's eyes gleamed. Poor odds, I've worked with worse. He looked at Elena. If we do this, if we get your people back and eliminate this threat, the settlement pays the keep's support costs for the next year. Agreed? Elena didn't hesitate. Agreed. And Miss Thorn receives a formal pardon for any alleged offenses, written and sealed by the full council. Vec looked like he'd swallowed glass, but he nodded. Then let's move. Rovan turned to his guards. Get the horses ready. Gather any settlement fighters who want to live through tomorrow. We ride in 20 minutes. The square exploded into motion. People running, shouting, scrambling to prepare. Kaela stood in the center of it, her heart pounding, her bruised knuckles throbbing. She'd just volunteered to lead a raid against impossible odds, to save people who'd called her a whore and laughed at her pain. Rovan appeared at her side. Last chance to back out. This isn't your fight anymore. It never stopped being my fight, Kaela said. I lived here for 3 years. I know these people. I know this land. And I know those raiders. I've negotiated with them before. I know how they think. And you think we can win? She met his eyes. I think we can survive. And sometimes that's the same thing. Rovan's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can't I be both? This time he definitely smiled. Apparently, he gripped her shoulder briefly. Stay close during the fight. Don't try to be a hero. We get in, get the hostages, get out. Understood? Understood. But even as she said it, Kaela knew it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing ever was. And as she watched the settlement scramble to prepare for a battle that might kill them all, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This was who she was. Not the woman who'd been betrayed, not the woman who'd been saved, but the woman who'd stand and fight even when the odds were impossible, even when the cost might be everything, especially then. 20 minutes later, they rode out, 32 fighters against 50 raiders, racing toward a confrontation that would either prove Kaela's worth or end her life. And as the settlement disappeared behind them, Darian's bloody face staring after them from the square, Kaela realized something that made her laugh out loud despite the terror. She'd finally stopped being nothing. Now she just had to survive being something. Now she just had to survive being something. The horses ate up the distance in a rhythm that felt like counting down to an explosion. 3 hours to the quarry. 3 hours to prepare for a fight that would either prove Kaela knew what she was talking about or get everyone killed. The settlement fighters rode in a tight group behind Rovan's guards, their faces showing every shade of fear and determination. Kaela recognized most of them. Marcus and Jen from the patrol, Finn from the keep's dinner table, a handful of others whose names she'd shared watch shifts with over the years. None of them had spoken to her since they'd mounted up. She was still the woman who'd been kissed by the Alpha, who'd punched Darian Cole in front of the entire settlement, who was now leading them into a battle that might be suicide. Trust took time. She didn't have time. An hour into the ride, Rovan pulled his horse alongside hers. Talk me through it again, the quarry layout. Kaela dragged her mind away from spiraling anxiety and focused. 3 main access points. North entrance is the widest. That's where they'd expect an attack. East side has a narrow path that drops down into the quarry floor. West side is mostly cliff face, but there's a service path the old mining operation used. Steep, treacherous, but it leads right to where they'd set up camp. How do you know where they'd camp? Because I've been there before. 2 years ago, when we were negotiating safe passage for supply runs. They always use the same spot, central location near the old foreman's building. Gives them shelter and a clear view of the north entrance. Rovan absorbed this. So we split into 3 groups. One creates a distraction at the north entrance. One comes in from the east. And one takes the west path and hits them from behind while they're focused on the other 2 approaches. Kaela's hands tightened on the reins. But the timing has to be perfect. If the west group moves too early, the raiders see them coming and we lose the element of surprise. Too late, and the distraction group gets slaughtered. How long between the distraction starting and the west group engaging? 5 minutes, maybe 6. Long enough for the raiders to commit to defending the north entrance, short enough that they don't have time to reposition. Rovan nodded slowly. Who do you trust to lead the west approach? That's the hardest route and the most critical timing. The question hung between them. Kaela knew what he was asking, who she trusted with the most dangerous part of this plan, who she believed could handle the pressure. Me, she said. I'll lead the west approach. No. Yes. I know that path. I know the terrain, and I know these raiders. I can read their positioning faster than anyone else. Which is exactly why you should be with me in the East Group, providing tactical intelligence. Rovan's voice was firm. The west approach is technical climbing in the dark, followed by close-quarters combat. That's work for my best fighters. Your best fighters don't know the quarry. They'll be guessing in the dark. Kaela met his eyes. I won't. They rode in silence for several strides. Finally, Rovan spoke. If you die doing this, I'm going to be very annoyed. Noted. I mean it, Kaela. You're valuable. More valuable than you realize. Throwing your life away to prove something to people who don't deserve it? This isn't about proving anything. She cut him off, surprised by the heat in her own voice. Those hostages? One of them is Mira's daughter. Another is a kid who just turned 16. They didn't do anything except be in the wrong place when raiders attacked. They don't deserve to die because the settlement can't afford ransom. Rovan studied her face. You actually care about them, even after everything. Caring about people doesn't stop just because they treated you like garbage. It should, probably. Would make things simpler. She looked away. But yeah, I care. Which is why I need to be on that west approach. Because if it goes wrong, I want it to be my mistake, not someone else's. Another long silence. Then Rovan nodded. Fine. You take 6 fighters. Finn goes with you. He's good in close quarters. You wait for my signal, then you move fast and hard. No heroics. Get in, 'cause chaos. Get out. What's the signal? You'll know it when you see it. They rode faster as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The landscape grew rougher, more barren. Old mining scars cut through hills, and the vegetation thinned to scrub and stubborn weeds. 2 hours in, they stopped to water the horses and finalize the plan. The fighters gathered in a loose circle while Rovan sketched the quarry layout in the dirt with a stick. North Group, 12 fighters. Your job is to make noise, draw their attention, make them think you're the main threat. He pointed to Marcus. You lead this group. Stay mobile, stay loud, but don't commit to a full assault. We're buying time, not winning the fight here. Marcus nodded, his face grim. East Group, 14 fighters. We go in quiet. Position ourselves near the hostage location. Once the West Group engages and creates chaos, we extract the hostages and anyone wounded. Rovan's eyes swept over his guards. Royce, Jax, you're with me. We move fast and we don't stop for anything except the people we came for. West Group. He looked at Kaela. 6 fighters. You know your job. Hit them from behind, create maximum confusion, then fall back to the east side for extraction. Do not get trapped. Do not engage in prolonged combat. In, chaos, out. Understood, Kaela said. Her mouth was dry, her heart hammering, but her voice came out steady. Finn stepped forward. I'll take the west approach with her. Who else? 4 of Rovan's guards volunteered immediately. Kaela recognized them from the keep, seasoned fighters with scars and steady hands. The kind of people who'd seen real combat and survived it. Good. Rovan stood. We approach from 3 different directions, converge on the quarry from positions they won't expect. North Group arrives first, makes contact. East and West Groups wait for my signal. Questions? Jen raised her hand. What if the hostages are already dead? The question made everyone flinch, but it was valid. Raiders weren't known for mercy. Then we make sure no one else dies, Rovan said flatly. And we make the raiders regret taking them in the first place. Anything else? Silence. Then let's move. We've got 1 hour before dark. The final hour passed in tense silence. They split into 3 groups at a fork in the road, each heading toward their designated approach. Kaela led her group west, following terrain that grew increasingly rough and rocky. Finn rode beside her. You really think this will work? I think we don't have a choice. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. She glanced at him. You didn't have to volunteer for this. Neither did you. He shrugged. But here we are, about to climb down a cliff face in the dark to fight people who'd kill us for our boots. The frontier's a strange place. Despite everything, Kaela almost laughed. That it is. They reached the west rim of the quarry as the last light faded from the sky. Below, fires flickered in the old mining camp. Kaela counted at least 40 raiders visible, maybe more in the shadows. They moved with the casual confidence of people who thought themselves safe. That's a lot of fighters, one of the guards muttered. 43 visible, Kaela counted. Probably 50 total like the report said, but look at their positions. They're all focused on the north entrance. No sentries on the west side. They don't think anyone would be stupid enough to come down that way. Wonder why, Finn said, looking at the steep path that dropped into darkness below. Because it's suicide in daylight. In the dark? Kaela secured her weapons, checking each knife and the short sword she'd borrowed from the keep's armory. It's just really stupid. They dismounted, leaving the horses with 1 guard. The other 5 would make the descent with her. Kaela moved to the edge of the path, her stomach clenching as she looked down. The drop was maybe 60 feet, the path barely wide enough for single file. 1 misstep and you'd tumble into rocks that would break every bone in your body. I'll go first, she said. Step exactly where I step. Use your hands. There are holds in the rock face. And for the love of everything, don't look down. You're really selling this plan, Finn muttered, but he positioned himself second in line. Kaela started down. The path was worse than she remembered. The rock was loose in places, crumbling under her boots. Her hands found holds by feel more than sight, and twice she nearly lost her footing on patches of ice. Behind her she could hear the others breathing hard, small rocks skittering down as they followed. Halfway down, one of the guards slipped. Kaela heard the gasp, the scramble, felt the person above her lurch into the rock face. For a terrible moment she thought they were going to fall, to take everyone below with them in a cascade of bodies and broken plans. But they caught themselves, held on, kept moving. By the time Kaela reached the bottom, her hands were bleeding and her legs were shaking. But they'd made it. All 6 of them stood at the base of the cliff, weapons drawn, staring at the raider camp 50 yards away through the darkness. Now we wait, Kaela whispered. The minutes crawled past. Kaela watched the camp, counting raiders, noting positions, looking for the hostages. There, in the old foreman's building, she could see figures through the broken windows, tied and guarded by 2 raiders. 5 hostages, still alive. That was something. A shout went up from the north side of the quarry, loud, aggressive, designed to draw attention. The distraction group had arrived. Raiders scrambled, grabbing weapons, running toward the north entrance. Kaela watched them funnel toward the perceived threat, exactly as planned. But a dozen stayed behind, guarding the camp center and the hostage building. Still manageable. Barely. More shouting from the north, the clash of weapons. Marcus's group was engaging, drawing the raiders into combat. The remaining raiders in camp were fixated on that direction, weapons ready, waiting to reinforce their fellows. Kaela's muscles coiled. Where was the signal? The East group should be in position now, ready to move on the hostages. They just needed... An explosion shook the quarry. Fire bloomed on the north side, bright and sudden, illuminating the entire camp in flickering orange light. That was the signal. Go! Kaela surged forward, her group behind her. They hit the camp from behind, while every raider was looking north. Kaela reached the first one before he even realized she was there, her blade finding the gap between his ribs with a precision born of practice and desperation. He went down without a sound. Finn took the next one. The other guards spread out, engaging raiders who were turning now, realizing they were under attack from multiple directions, confusion and panic spreading like fire. Kaela sprinted toward the hostage building. A raider stepped into her path, sword raised. She ducked under his swing, came up inside his guard, and drove her knife into his throat. Blood sprayed hot across her face. She didn't stop moving. The door to the hostage building was barred. Kaela kicked it hard, once, twice. The wood splintering but not breaking. Behind her, she could hear the chaos of combat, shouts, screams, the ring of steel on steel. Finn appeared beside her. Move! He hit the door with his shoulder, his full weight behind it. The bar cracked. One more hit and it gave way. Inside, 5 people huddled in the corner, filthy and terrified. The 2 raider guards were turning, weapons coming up. Kaela didn't give them time to react. She threw one of her knives, caught the first guard in the chest. He staggered back. Finn was already on the second one, grappling, forcing him down. Mira's daughter? Kaela called out. A girl maybe 15 years old raised her shaking hand. I'm Senna. Can you walk? I think so. Then move. Now. Everyone out. Head for the east side. There's an extraction team waiting. The hostages scrambled up, some limping, all terrified but alive. Kaela herded them toward the door, checking the camp through the broken windows. The chaos was working. Raiders were running in every direction, trying to respond to 3 simultaneous threats, failing to coordinate. But it wouldn't last. Any moment now, someone would take charge, start organizing a real defense. They needed to leave. Now. Kaela pushed the hostages out of the building, pointing them toward the east side where she could see Rovan's group moving forward to meet them. 2 of her fighters peeled off to escort the hostages, weapons ready to defend them. That left her, Finn, and 2 guards in the middle of a raider camp that was starting to figure out what was happening. Fall back! Kaela shouted. A raider came at her from the left. She parried his strike, twisted inside his reach, hamstrung him with a vicious cut that dropped him screaming. Another appeared on her right. Finn intercepted him, their swords clashing in the firelight. They fought their way toward the east side, step by bloody step. Kaela's arms burned. Her breath came in gasps. She'd trained for combat, had fought before, but this was different. This was sustained, desperate, kill-or-die fighting with no room for mistakes. A blade caught her shoulder, tearing through leather and cloth to score her skin. Pain flared bright and immediate. She spun, found her attacker, drove her sword through his stomach with a force born of rage and fear. Kaela! Finn's voice urgent. She looked up. Raiders were converging on their position, a dozen at least, cutting off their path to the east side. They'd realized the hostages were being extracted and were moving to intercept. They were trapped. Kaela's mind raced. They couldn't fight through that many, couldn't run. They'd be cut down from behind. The west cliff was at their backs, unclimbable in combat. The north entrance was chaos. The east was blocked. No way out. We make a stand here, Finn said, positioning himself back to back with her. The 2 remaining guards did the same, forming a tight circle. Been nice knowing you. Likewise, Kaela said, raising her sword. Her shoulders screamed, her hands shook, but she'd be damned if she died without taking some of these bastards with her. The raiders advanced, 12 of them, maybe 15. Too many. This was it. Then a sound cut through the chaos. A horn, deep and resonant, coming from outside the quarry. It echoed off the stone walls, making raiders pause, confusion rippling through their ranks. Another horn answered, then another. The sounds came from all sides, surrounding the quarry with phantom forces. "What?" one of the raiders said. Then the arrows came, not many, maybe a dozen, but they fell from the darkness beyond the firelight, precise and deadly, taking down raiders with the kind of accuracy that spoke of skilled archers. The raiders broke. Panic spread faster than fire, and suddenly they were running, scrambling for the north entrance, abandoning the camp entirely. In the sudden quiet that followed, Rovan emerged from the east side with his full group. Behind him came 20 more fighters, settlement reinforcements that hadn't been part of the original plan. "Mira sent them," Rovan called out, moving toward Kaela. "Said she wasn't about to let her daughter die because the council was too cowardly to commit proper forces, so she gathered every able fighter who'd listen and followed us here." Kaela stared at him, then at the reinforcements. Mira herself was among them, bloodied but alive, her face fierce with maternal fury. "The horns were a bluff," Rovan continued, reaching Kayla's side. "We don't have forces surrounding the quarry, but the raiders don't know that. And after being hit from 3 sides simultaneously, they're too disorganized to question it." He looked at her shoulder, his expression darkening. "You're hurt." "I'm alive." Kaela lowered her sword. Her whole body was shaking now, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "The hostages?" "Safe. Already being escorted back to the settlement." Rovan gripped her good shoulder. "You did it. Your plan worked." "We did it," she corrected. "All of us." Around them, fighters were checking the wounded, securing the camp, making sure the raiders were truly gone. The battle was over. They'd won. Against impossible odds, through coordination and tactics and sheer stubborn refusal to lose, they'd won. Finn appeared beside them, breathing hard, blood spattering his face. "Never doing that again." "Liar," Kaela said, and laughed. It came out shaky and slightly hysterical, but it was genuine. The ride back to the settlement took half the night. They moved slower, burdened with wounded and exhausted fighters. But they moved together, united by combat in a way words never could have achieved. By the time they reached the settlement gates, dawn was breaking, and the entire settlement had gathered to meet them. Senna ran to Mira, throwing herself into her mother's arms with sobs that could be heard across the square. The other hostages reunited with their families. People were crying, laughing, pressing forward to see who'd lived and who hadn't. The settlement had lost 3 fighters in the battle. 7 were wounded, including Kaela. But they'd rescued 5 hostages, eliminated a raider threat that had been terrorizing them for months, and proven that coordinated tactics could overcome superior numbers. The council stood at the edge of the square, watching. Even Vec looked shaken, his earlier fury replaced by something more complex. Elena stepped forward first. "Miss Thorn," she said formally. "On behalf of the council, I want to thank you for your service to this settlement. You saved lives today. And you did it for people who—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "For people who didn't deserve your help. That speaks to your character." The crowd went quiet, waiting. Kaela looked at Elena, at the council, at the crowd full of faces that had mocked her, doubted her, dismissed her. "I didn't do it for you," she said. Not cruel, just honest. "I did it because it was right. Because those hostages deserved a chance. Because sometimes being strong means helping people even when they've hurt you." She turned to face the crowd. "I'm not coming back here. My place is at the Northern Keep now, but I won't forget this settlement. I won't forget the people here who treated me with decency when others didn't." Her eyes found Mira. "And I won't forget that even in the worst places there are good people trying to survive." Mira wiped her eyes, nodding. Darian stood at the back of the crowd. His face was bruised from where Kaela had punched him, his eyes hollow with something that might have been regret. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. Kaela turned away before he could. Whatever he had to say, she didn't need to hear it. Rovan moved to stand beside her. "Ready to leave?" "More than ready." "Good, because we still have a lot of work to do." He raised his voice. "The settlement owes the keep support costs for 1 year, as agreed. Elena, you'll receive the documentation within the week, and Darian Cole—" He let the name hang in the air. "The council will decide your fate, but know this. If you ever threaten Miss Thorn again, if you spread more lies or attempt any retaliation, you'll answer to me personally. Understood?" Darian nodded, his face pale. "Then we're done here." Rovan gestured to his fighters. "Mount up. We're going home." The word home caught Kaela off guard, but as she climbed onto Storm's back, her wounded shoulder protesting, she realized it felt right. The keep was her home now, not because she'd been saved there, not because the Alpha had kissed her in front of a crowd, but because she'd chosen it. Because she'd proven her worth through action, not words. Because she'd found people who saw her value and didn't diminish it. As they rode out of the settlement, Kaela looked back once. The square was still crowded, people talking in animated clusters, processing everything that had happened. She'd come here 3 years ago with nothing. She'd built a life, lost it, and built something new from the wreckage. The frontier didn't forgive weakness, but it rewarded strength and courage, and the stubborn refusal to stay down when life knocked you flat. Kaela touched her wounded shoulder, feeling the sting of it, and smiled. She'd been called nothing. She'd been dismissed. She'd been betrayed and humiliated and left for dead. And now? Now she rode beside a king, respected by fighters who'd seen her in combat, proven in ways that couldn't be argued or dismissed. "You're thinking too loud," Rovan said beside her. "Just processing. Process faster. We've got supply line negotiations tomorrow, and I need you sharp." "Already back to work?" "You wanted purpose. I'm giving you purpose." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd prefer rest." Kaela thought about it for maybe half a second. "No. Work sounds good." "Good. Because you've set a dangerous precedent. The Council's going to expect us to rescue every settlement from every threat now. Then they should have treated their people better. Wouldn't need rescuing so often." Rovan's laugh was short and sharp. "Fair point." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The keep emerged on the horizon as the sun climbed higher, solid and permanent against the mountains. "Thank you," Kaela said quietly, "for believing I could do this, for giving me the chance." "I didn't give you anything," Rovan replied. "You earned it. The moment you stood up in that square and punched your former lover in the face, you earned it. Everything since has just been confirmation." "Still, thank you." He nodded once. "You're welcome. Now stop being sentimental and help me figure out how to explain to my supply officers why we committed military resources to a settlement dispute. Tell them it was a training exercise. They'll never believe that. Then tell them the truth, that sometimes doing the right thing is more valuable than following procedures." Rovan looked at her for a long moment. "You know, when I first started watching you, I thought you were just competent, good at your job, useful. And now? Now I think you might be the most dangerous person I've ever hired." He smiled, in the best possible way. Kaela laughed, the sound carrying across the open frontier, free and unguarded. Dangerous. She liked that. Better than nothing. Better than convenient. Better than all the things she'd been called before. Dangerous meant powerful. Meant people would think twice before dismissing her. Meant she'd never be nothing again. The keep's gates opened as they approached. Guards saluted. People called greetings. Denna appeared with fresh linens and orders to report to the healer immediately. Kaela dismounted, her legs protesting, her shoulder throbbing, her body screaming for rest. But her mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's work, to supply negotiations and threat assessments and all the ways she could prove that Rovan's faith in her wasn't misplaced. She'd survived betrayal. She'd survived humiliation. She'd survived combat that should have killed her. Now she'd survived success. And that, Kaela thought as she walked into the keep, with her head high and her past finally behind her, was going to be the most interesting challenge of all. And that, Kaela thought, as she walked into the keep with her head high and her past finally behind her, was going to be the most interesting challenge of all. The healer's quarters smelled like herbs and antiseptic. An older woman named Brea cleaned Kaela's shoulder wound with efficient, no-nonsense movements that hurt worse than getting cut had. "Lucky," Brea said, threading a needle. "Another inch and this would have hit the joint. You'd have lost mobility." "Doesn't feel lucky," Kaela said through gritted teeth as the needle pierced skin. "Most things worth doing don't." Brea worked quickly, her stitches neat and tight. "Heard what you did. The quarry raid. People are talking." I'm sure they are. Not the way you think. They're impressed, saying the Alpha finally found someone who can match his tactical mind. She tied off the last stitch. That's rare. Most people who work for him are either too afraid to question his plans or too stupid to see the flaws. You apparently did both during the planning. Kaela blinked. I argued with him about approach vectors. Exactly. And he listened. That's what has everyone talking. Brea applied a salve that smelled sharp and medicinal. The Alpha doesn't listen to people he doesn't respect. Keep that in mind. After Brea bandaged her shoulder and sent her away with strict orders to rest, Kaela made it back to her room and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep pulled at her like an undertow. She should have surrendered to it. Instead, her mind kept replaying the battle. The descent down the cliff. The feel of her blade finding flesh. The moment when she'd thought they were trapped and would die there. And Rovan's voice cutting through it all. You did it. Your plan worked. Except it hadn't been just her plan. It had been collaboration, adaptation, dozens of small decisions made by different people that had added up to survival. She'd been part of something larger than herself, and that feeling was addictive in a way she hadn't expected. A knock at her door pulled her from half-sleep. What? Council meeting in 1 hour. Garrett's voice filtered through the wood. The Alpha requests your presence. Kaela groaned. I just got stitched up. He said you'd say that. He also said, and I quote, tell her to stop being dramatic. The stitches are superficial. Despite the exhaustion, Kaela smiled. Fine. I'll be there. She dragged herself upright, changed into clean clothes that didn't smell like blood and smoke, and made her way to the council chambers. The room was larger than she'd expected, with a long table surrounded by chairs and maps covering every wall. Rovan sat at the head of the table, 5 of his senior advisors around him. They all looked up when she entered. Miss Thorn? Rovan said. Glad you could join us. How's the shoulder? Attached. Functional. She took the empty chair he gestured to. What's this about? Supply route security. We've had reports of increased raider activity on the Eastern Pass. After yesterday's success, I want your assessment on defensive positioning. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Kaela found herself drawn into debates about logistics, terrain advantages, and resource allocation. Her knowledge of the frontier's geography, knowledge she'd built through years of survival, proved invaluable. The advisors initially looked skeptical when she challenged their assumptions, but Rovan backed her up every time her logic held. By the end, they'd restructured the entire Eastern security plan based partially on her suggestions. Good work, Rovan said as the advisors filed out. You have a talent for seeing patterns others miss. I just think about what would kill me and plan accordingly. That's called strategic thinking. Most people overcomplicate it. He stood, stretching. I have another meeting now, supply contracts. But I wanted to tell you something. The Settlement Council sent a formal letter. They're ratifying your pardon and requesting a permanent liaison position between the settlement and the keep. Kaela's stomach dropped. They want me to go back? No. They want you to be the official point of contact. You'd stay here, but handle all communications and coordination with the settlement. It's actually a smart political move on their part. Shows good faith, acknowledges your value, and gives them a direct line to me through someone who understands both worlds. What did you tell them? Tell that it's your decision. Rovan's eyes were steady on hers. You could refuse. You have no obligation to help them after what they put you through. Kaela thought about it. About Mira and Senna. About the fighters who'd volunteered for the quarry raid. About Elena trying to be fair in a system that rewarded cruelty. I'll do it, she said. But on my terms. I'm not their employee. I'm keep personnel who happens to coordinate with them. The distinction matters. Agreed, Rovan nodded. I'll have Garrett draft the response. Now go rest before you fall over. Tomorrow we have trade negotiations with the Southern Territories, and I need you alert. 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and work that stretched Kaela's capabilities in ways she'd never experienced. She coordinated supply runs, mediated disputes between settlements, advised on security placements, and slowly built a reputation as someone who could solve problems other people gave up on. The Keep's personnel stopped looking at her like she didn't belong, started including her in conversations, asked her opinion on matters that mattered. Denna became a genuine friend, teaching her the Keep's social dynamics and warning her about which advisors held grudges. Finn and the other fighters who'd gone to the quarry treated her like one of their own, with respect earned through shared danger. And Rovan continued to surprise her. He was demanding, sometimes harsh, but never cruel. When she made mistakes, he corrected her directly. When she succeeded, he acknowledged it. He didn't treat her like she was fragile or needed protection. He treated her like a competent professional who happened to work for him. It was addictive. The settlement sent regular communications now. Requests for coordination, reports on situations, occasional thank yous that felt stilted and formal. Kaela handled them with professional distance, neither warm nor cold. The past was the past. She'd moved beyond it, but she hadn't forgotten. One morning, Garrett appeared at her door earlier than usual. The Alpha needs you in his study, now. It's urgent. Kaela grabbed her coat and followed him, her mind racing through possibilities. Another raid? Political crisis? Supply chain failure? Rovan stood at his desk, holding a letter. His expression was thunderous. What happened? Kaela asked. Darian Cole is dead. The words hit like a physical blow. Kayla's breath caught. What? Killed 3 days ago, stabbed in his quarters. The settlement council just sent word. Rovan's voice was tight. And they're claiming you're responsible. The floor seemed to drop away. That's insane. I've been here the entire time. I know. I have a dozen witnesses who can verify your whereabouts. But the council is saying you hired someone, that you wanted revenge. He crumpled the letter. It's a setup. Someone killed him and is trying to frame you for it. Kayla's mind raced. Who benefits from his death? That's the question. Rovan moved to the window. Vec, maybe. His daughter was humiliated by the broken engagement, or any of Darian's rivals on the council, or someone who wanted to destabilize the relationship between the keep and the settlement, or someone who wants me gone and thinks this is the perfect excuse. That too. Rovan turned to face her. The settlement is demanding you return for questioning. If you refuse, they're threatening to accuse the keep of harboring a murderer and break all coordination agreements. So I'm trapped. Go back and face a rigged trial, or stay here and watch everything we've built collapse. No. Rovan's voice was steel. You're not trapped, because I'm going with you, and we're going to find out who actually killed Darian Cole and shove the truth down the council's throat until they choke on it. 2 days later, they rode back to the settlement with 20 guards and enough evidence of Kayla's whereabouts to bury any accusation. But evidence didn't matter if the council was determined to make her a scapegoat. The settlement felt different this time. Hostile. People watched them ride in with suspicion instead of fear. The council waited in their building, faces closed and unfriendly. Vex stood at the front. Miss Thorn? You're here to answer for murder. I'm here to prove my innocence, Kaela corrected, since I was nowhere near this settlement when Darian died. We have a witness who says you paid them to kill him. Then bring forward this witness. Vex gestured and a man was brought in. Young, maybe 20, with the look of someone who'd been coached. She paid me. Gave me 50 silver to kill Darian Cole. Kaela stared at him. She'd never seen this person in her life. I don't even know you. You met me at the market 3 weeks ago, offered me the job. I haven't been to this settlement in 3 weeks. I've been at the Northern Keep, working on supply coordination. I have 24 witnesses. Witnesses can be bought, Vex said. Not mine, Rovan cut in. His voice was cold enough to freeze blood. My senior staff and guards are beyond reproach, and Miss Thorn's schedule has been documented every single day. She's been in meetings, negotiations, and training sessions. She couldn't have traveled here without me knowing. Perhaps she sent someone else. Enough. Rovan stepped forward. This is a farce. You have one dubious witness with no evidence and a transparent political motive. I want to see Darian's body. I want to see the murder scene. And I want to talk to everyone who had access to his quarters that night. Vex's face reddened. You have no authority to cut. I have absolute authority. Or have you forgotten that this settlement exists under my governance? Rovan's eyes were ice. You can cooperate, or I can remove the entire council and install new leadership. Your choice. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Elena stepped forward, her face troubled. My lord, perhaps if we review the evidence together. Show me the body, Rovan repeated. They led them to the settlement's cold storage, where Darian's body lay wrapped in cloth. Rovan unwrapped it with clinical efficiency, examining the wounds. Single stab to the heart. Professional? Quick. He pointed to the angle. Left-handed attacker, shorter than the victim. The blow came from below, suggesting someone close to him. He looked at Kaela. You're right-handed and nearly as tall as Darian was. This wasn't your work. That doesn't prove, Vex started. It proves the basic facts don't match the accusation. Now show me his quarters. Darian's room had been cleaned, but not well. Kaela saw signs of struggle. Overturned furniture, broken glass. This hadn't been a quiet assassination. It had been a fight. Rovan examined everything with methodical precision. Kaela watched, her mind working through possibilities. Who would want Darian dead? Who had access? Who benefited? Then she saw it. A piece of fabric caught on a splinter in the doorframe. Dark blue, expensive. The kind of material wealthy people wore. Rovan? She said quietly, pointing. He extracted the fabric carefully. Councilman Vec, what color cloak does your daughter wear? Vec's face went white. That doesn't... You can't... Answer the question. Dark blue. But many people... Bring Maris Vec here, now. It took 30 minutes of questioning, but the truth eventually came out. Maris had killed Darian, not out of revenge for the broken engagement, but because he'd threatened to expose her affair with another council member, a married man whose scandal would have destroyed both their families. When Darian confronted her about it, planning to use it as leverage to regain his council position, she'd panicked, killed him, and then convinced her father to help cover it up by framing Kaela, the perfect scapegoat, already hated by the settlement, with motive everyone would believe. The false witness had been paid by Vec, coached to tell a story that would see Kaela exiled or executed. By the time the full truth emerged, the council chambers were packed with people who'd come to watch Kayla's trial. Instead, they watched Maris confess through tears while her father tried desperately to salvage something from the wreckage. You tried to murder an innocent woman's reputation to save your family's honor, Rovan said to Vec. His voice was quiet, but it carried. You suborned perjury. You obstructed justice. You nearly destroyed the relationship between this settlement and the keep because you couldn't face scandal. My lord, please, you're removed from the council effective immediately. Your daughter will face trial for murder, and the settlement will pay reparations to Miss Thorn for the damage to her reputation and the danger you put her in. Rovan turned to Elena. You're acting head of the council until proper elections can be held. Do you accept? Elena looked shaken, but nodded. Yes, my lord. Good. Clean this mess up. And Elena, the next time someone tries to scapegoat an innocent person, I expect you to investigate before making accusations. Understood? Understood. Rovan took Kaela's arm. We're leaving. Outside, the crowd had grown. Word of what happened was spreading like wildfire. Kaela could see the shift in how people looked at her, from suspicion to shock to something that might have been shame. Mira pushed through the crowd. Kaela, I'm sorry. We should have known better. Should have questioned. You should have, Kaela agreed. Not cruel, just factual. But you didn't, and that tells me everything I need to know about this place. Will you ever come back? Kaela looked at the settlement, at the buildings she'd helped construct, the walls she'd helped defend, the people she'd bled beside. No, she said, I don't think I will. The settlement can send communications through official channels if you need coordination, but this place stopped being my home the moment Darian called me nothing, and everyone laughed. You can't get that back. Either of us. Mira's face crumpled, but she nodded. I understand. For what it's worth, I'm proud of who you've become. Thank you. Take care of Senna. They rode out for the last time. Kaela didn't look back. A week later, official pardons arrived from the settlement, formal apologies from the new council, requests for continued coordination. Kaela filed them away and got back to work. The keep had become her world now. Her routines, her colleagues, her purpose. She woke before dawn to train with the fighters, spent mornings in meetings coordinating supply lines and security. Afternoons were for negotiations with traders, settlers, anyone who needed the keep's resources or intervention. Evenings were for planning, reviewing reports, preparing for the next crisis. It was exhausting, demanding, exactly what she needed. 6 months after Darian's death, Rovan called her to his study during a rare evening when neither of them had obligations. "We need to talk about your position," he said. Kaela's stomach tightened. "Am I being reassigned?" "No. Promoted. I'm creating a new role, Director of Frontier Relations. You'd oversee all coordination between the keep and the settlements, manage crisis response, and advise on territorial policy." He paused. "It's the second most powerful position in the keep's civilian administration." Kaela stared at him. That's a council-level position." "Yes, it is. You've earned it." Rovan met her eyes. "I know you came here because you had nowhere else to go, because I offered you protection when you needed it most. But you've proven yourself a dozen times over. This isn't charity. This is recognition of value. The other advisors will resent it. Let them. You're better at this work than any of them." He pushed a document across the desk. "This is the official appointment. Sign it, and the position is yours. Refuse it, and I'll respect that decision. But Kaela, you deserve this. Not because of what happened to you, because of what you've done since." She picked up the document, reading through the responsibilities and authority. It was real, substantial, the kind of position people spent lifetimes trying to achieve. And he was offering it to her because she'd earned it. Kaela signed. "Good," Rovan said. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. "Now we need to discuss the spring supply negotiations. The eastern settlements are forming a trading bloc, and I need your assessment on—" "Can I ask you something first?" Kaela interrupted. "Of course." "Why did you kiss me that night? The real reason?" Rovan was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was tired of watching good people get destroyed by small-minded fools. Because you deserved better than being called nothing by someone who wasn't worth your time. And because—" He stopped, started again. "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of why I do this work, why I bother trying to build something better in this harsh place. You could have given up. Should have, probably. But you didn't. You kept fighting. That's rare, worth protecting." "Is that all?" She kept her voice carefully neutral. "No?" His eyes met hers. "But the rest isn't appropriate to discuss in a professional context." Her breath caught. "And if the context changed, then we'd have a different conversation." Rovan's voice was soft. "But Kaela, I won't take advantage of the power dynamic here. You work for me. That complicates things. If you want something more than a professional relationship, you'd need to be the one to initiate it. And even then, I'd make sure you understood that your position here isn't dependent on my personal feelings. You've earned your place through merit, and nothing changes that." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Raw and vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected from a man who ruled through strength and certainty. "I'll keep that in mind," she said. "Good. Now about those supply negotiations." But Kaela wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking about choices, about power dynamics and professional boundaries and the difference between being claimed and choosing to claim something for yourself. 3 months later, after a particularly brutal week of negotiations with hostile traders, Kaela found Rovan in his study long past midnight. He looked exhausted, paper scattered across his desk, a half-empty glass of whiskey at his elbow. "You should sleep," she said from the doorway. "So should you." He looked up. "What are you doing awake?" "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about the Western route problem." And I think we're approaching it wrong. We're trying to force security through strength, but what if we built relationships instead? If we invested in the communities along that route, gave them stakes in keeping it safe, they'd police it themselves," Rovan finished. "That's actually brilliant. Why didn't my advisors suggest that?" "Because they think like soldiers, not settlers." Kaela moved into the room. "You need both perspectives." "Apparently I do." He smiled, tired but genuine. "Thank you. I'll present that to the council tomorrow." She should have left then, should have gone back to her room, let him sleep, maintained professional distance. Instead, she stayed. "Rovan, that conversation you said we'd have if the context changed?" He went very still. "Yes? I'm changing the context, not as your employee, as someone who's choosing this." She took a breath. "I think about that kiss, about what it meant, about what it could mean if we let it. Kaela, I'm not fragile. I'm not confused about power dynamics. I'm not trying to secure my position through personal relationships. She met his eyes. I'm just tired of pretending I don't care about you beyond professional respect. And I wanted you to know that if you're interested in exploring this, whatever this is, I am too, on equal terms. Rovan stood, moving around the desk until he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to simple professional relationships. I'm sure. And if it doesn't work, if we try this and it falls apart, then we'll handle it like adults. But Rovan, I've survived betrayal, humiliation, combat, and false murder accusations. I think I can handle a relationship that might not work out. His laugh was soft. Fair point. He reached up, his hand gentle against her jaw in an echo of that first kiss. You're certain? Stop asking and kiss me already. He did. This time it was different. Not a declaration or a claim, just two people choosing each other, complicated and messy and real. When they finally pulled apart, Rovan's expression was soft in a way she'd never seen before. This is going to be complicated. Everything worth doing is. The advisors will gossip. Let them. The settlements will use it as political leverage. We'll handle it. She smiled. We make a good team, remember? Tactically and otherwise. That we do. He kissed her again, softer this time. Stay tonight? I thought you'd never ask. The seasons changed. The frontier remained harsh and unforgiving. Raiders still attacked. Settlements still squabbled. Crises still emerged that required solutions no one had tried before. But Kaela faced them all with a confidence she'd never possessed in her old life. She'd been tested by fire and proven herself capable. She'd been called nothing and transformed it into power. She'd been betrayed and used that pain to build something stronger. The keep thrived under her coordination. The settlements grudgingly admitted that her policies worked. Even the most skeptical advisors acknowledged her value. And at night she fell asleep in Rovan's arms, secure in the knowledge that she'd chosen this life rather than had it forced upon her. 1 year after that first kiss, the settlement sent a delegation. They wanted to honor her service with a formal recognition ceremony, wanted to apologize publicly for how they'd treated her. Kaela considered refusing, but Rovan convinced her to accept. They need to acknowledge what they did, he said, not for you, for themselves. So they learned to treat people better in the future. So she went, stood in the same square where Darian had called her nothing, where Rovan had kissed her, where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. The entire settlement gathered. Elena gave a speech about mistakes and growth and the importance of recognizing value in all people. The new council presented her with an official commendation for her service, both past and present. And then Mira stepped forward with something wrapped in cloth. We wanted to give you something meaningful, Mira said. Something that represents who you've become. She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a blade, beautifully forged, perfectly balanced, with her name engraved on the hilt. Made by our best smith, to replace the one you lost protecting our people. Kaela took the blade, feeling the weight of it. It was perfect. More than she'd ever owned before. Thank you, she said simply. No, thank you. Mira's eyes were wet. For not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to. After the ceremony, as they prepared to leave, an older woman approached. Kaela didn't recognize her at first. Weather-worn face, gray hair, rough hands that spoke of hard labor. Then she saw the eyes. Her mother's eyes. Kaela, the woman said. Her voice shook. It's me. It's your mother. The world tilted. Kaela hadn't seen her mother in 6 years, not since she'd fled their village after her father's violence had escalated beyond bearing. She'd thought her mother stayed, thought she'd chosen him over her daughter. Mom? I left him 2 years after you ran, finally got the courage. Her mother's face crumpled. I've been looking for you ever since. Heard stories about a woman at the Northern Keep who'd risen from nothing. Took me months to confirm it was you. Kaela couldn't speak. Couldn't process this. I don't expect forgiveness, her mother continued. I know I should have protected you better, should have left with you, but I was scared and weak, and I've regretted it every day since. She took a shaking breath. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you, so proud. You became everything I couldn't. Rovan's hand found Kayla's shoulder, steadying her. I don't know what to say, Kaela managed. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Her mother pressed something into her hand, a small wooden carving of a bird. Your father made this for you when you were small, before he changed. I've kept it all these years. Thought you might want it. Kaela looked at the carving, remembered her father's hand shaping wood with infinite patience. Before the drinking, before the violence, before everything fell apart. Thank you, she whispered. Her mother nodded and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kaela stood there holding a carved bird and a new blade, artifacts of two different lives, the one she'd fled and the one she'd built. Do you want to go after her? Rovan asked quietly. No, not yet. Kaela tucked the carving into her pocket. Maybe someday, when I'm ready, but right now? She looked at him. Right now, I want to go home. To the keep? To wherever you are. That's home now. They rode out together as the sun set over the frontier, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. The settlement grew smaller behind them, fading into the landscape like a memory that mattered less with each passing mile. Kaela touched the blade at her hip, the one engraved with her name, marking her as someone who mattered, who was valued, who was more than nothing. She'd been betrayed in the harshest possible way, had stood alone and humiliated while people laughed, had been kissed by a king and transformed by that moment into something she'd never imagined becoming. The frontier had tried to break her, had thrown everything it had at her, betrayal, violence, false accusations, the weight of a past she couldn't escape. She'd survived it all. More than survived. She'd thrived. And now she rode beside a man who saw her worth without diminishing it, who challenged her, respected her, loved her for exactly who she was, scarred and strong and still learning how to be powerful without apology. What are you thinking? Rovan asked. That I'm grateful Darian betrayed me. He looked at her sharply. Grateful? If he hadn't, I'd still be in that settlement, thinking I'd built something worthwhile, thinking survival was enough. She smiled. He showed me it wasn't, and that freed me to become this. This being? Dangerous, powerful, yours, but only because I chose to be. She reached across the space between their horses, her hand finding his. Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for being worth seeing. Rovan squeezed her hand. And Kaela, you were always powerful. You just needed the right battlefield to prove it. The keep appeared on the horizon, solid and permanent against the darkening sky. Lights flickered in windows, smoke rose from chimneys. People moved with purpose through courtyards and corridors, building something that would last. Her people now. Her place. Her power. Earned through blood and choices and the stubborn refusal to stay broken. As they rode through the gates, guards saluted. Colleagues called greetings. Denna appeared with messages that couldn't wait and gossip that could. Life continued, demanding and complicated and exactly what Kaela had chosen. That night, in Rovan's quarters with firelight casting shadows on stone walls, he pulled her close and whispered against her hair. The council's proposing a formal partnership between us. Political alliance, they're calling it. What are you calling it? Marriage. If you want it, no pressure, no expectations, just an option. If you're interested. Kaela pulled back to look at his face, saw vulnerability there, uncertainty. This powerful man who commanded territories and ruled with absolute authority, unsure if she'd say yes. Ask me properly, she said. Kaela Thorn. Will you marry me? Will you stand beside me, not as someone I saved or claimed, but as an equal partner in building something better in this harsh place? She thought about everything that had led to this moment, every betrayal, every humiliation, every choice that had brought her from nothing to here. Yes, she said, but on one condition. Name it. We do this as equals, not as king and subject, not as savior and saved, as partners who chose each other. Agreed. He kissed her, slow and deep. Though technically, you're marrying up. I'm royalty. And I'm the woman who punched her former lover in front of the entire settlement. I think we're even. His laugh rumbled through his chest. Fair point. Outside, the frontier wind howled. Tomorrow would bring new crises, new challenges, new battles to fight. The settlements would scheme, raiders would attack, political rivals would test boundaries. But tonight, Kaela Thorn, once called nothing, now powerful beyond measure, fell asleep in the arms of a king she'd chosen, in a life she'd built from the wreckage of betrayal. The frontier didn't forgive weakness, but it rewarded strength. And Kaela had discovered she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. The woman who'd been publicly humiliated had become the woman the entire North respected. The woman who'd been called nothing had proven she was everything. The woman who'd been betrayed had turned that pain into power that would reshape the territories for years to come. Whispers spread through the borderlands, stories of the Alpha's wife who'd fought raiders, exposed murderers, and transformed from broken to dangerous in the span of a single kiss. They weren't entirely accurate. The kiss hadn't transformed her. It had simply been the moment she'd stopped accepting less than she deserved. Everything after that, that was her choice, her fight, her victory. And in the harsh frontier where only the strong survived, Kaela Thorn had become legend. Not because a king had chosen her, but because she'd chosen herself. And in the end, that made all the difference.